This is the day that has been given to us. Rather than creating it, earning it, or deserving it, we receive this day. Receive it as a gift from the universe, a gift from God, a gift from life itself. As we gather today online and in person, let us receive the gift that this day brings, and let us make of it a time to recommit to our highest ideals and our deepest commitments. In our freely covenanted faith of Unitarian Universalism, we know that it is the shared commitments of our covenant, not any creed or belief, that bind us together in beloved community and that inspire us to faithful service. So as we enter our time of worship on this day at the Birmingham Unitarian Church, let's join together in giving voice to the promise of this congregation's covenant. As part of this beloved BUC community, I promise to strive to be my best self in all my interactions, assume the best intentions of everyone's actions, be mindful of our shared humanity in my communications, pause, reflect, and be part of the solution when things go awry. Thus do we covenant with one another.
Good morning, Birmingham Unitarian Church.
Good morning.
Very good. It is good to be together again. Whether you are joining us here in the sanctuary, remotely via Zoom, or watching this recording later, it is good to connect with you. As a multi-platform church, it is important for us to build a bridge between online and in-person participants. We call this connection opportunity Greeting Our Virtual Neighbors. First, we'll project the image of folks who are currently on Zoom up here on our screen. Let's take yourself and put yourself on the camera. All right. Ask them to turn their cameras on and give us a wave. Thank you all. Now, we who are gathered in person will turn to face the camera in the back and give them a wave. If you are visiting us for the first time, welcome. We're glad you're here. If you are with us in the sanctuary, we invite you to join us after service for coffee and conversation in our social hall, which is located to the left as you exit the sanctuary. If you are with us on Zoom, we invite you to stay on the call for a virtual coffee hour immediately after service ends. Whenever and however we connect with BUC, we are building BUC. At home, on campus, in the world, every day. We are Birmingham Unitarian Church, and we are building the beloved community. This morning's chalice lighting is by Rachel Hayes. We light our chalice this morning with our hearts turned to the work of our congregation. We have inherited this institution from several generations of people who believed in the power of human beings to bear love into the world. We carry this tradition for those who find comfort, inspiration, and joy within its real and virtual spaces. We tend the spark of imagination and hope for the world to come.
Please rise now in body and or spirit as we sing our first hymn, hymn number 346 in the gray hymnal. Come, sing a song with me, verses 1, 2, and 4. Come, sing a song with me. Come, sing a song with me. Come, sing a song with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come, dream a dream with me. Come, dream a dream with me. Come, dream a dream with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come, share a rose with me. Come, share a rose with me. Come, share a rose with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
Long ago, far across the sea in the country of Poland, a land of wind-swept plains and great flowing rivers, there lived a king named King Sigismund and a queen named Queen Bona. They had a daughter whose name was Isabella. As Princess Isabella grew, the king and queen taught her to be a good and wise ruler over the people in the land. When Princess Isabella was grown, a king from a neighboring country asked for her hand in marriage, and her parents said yes. Isabella was excited. She was going to be marrying King John of Hungary, until she realized that she would have to leave home. I shall miss you, Mother, Isabella said suddenly, wishing that she did not have to go. And I shall miss you, her mother replied, but some of your friends are going to go with you. And if you ever have need, I will send my good friend, Dr. Biandrada, to you. He will watch over you if you're ill, and he will give you counsel when you are well. Her father kissed her on the forehead, and her mother kissed her on the cheek, saying, "Go with God, my daughter, and be a good wife to your new husband and a wise queen of your new land, as we have taught you to be." And so, with her parents' blessing and with her friends by her side, Isabella set out with a glad heart and a strong will, determined to be a good wife to her new husband and a wise queen of her new land. The wedding was glorious, and Princess Isabella of Poland became Queen Isabella of Hungary. And soon, Isabella had another title, for she gave birth to a little boy, and she became a mother as well as a queen. They named the child John Sigismund, after his father, King John of Hungary, and after his grandfather, King Sigismund of Poland. Isabella wanted to be a wise and good queen and to help all of the people. But the land of Hungary was torn by great wars. The king fought with other kings. The nobles fought with each other. This group of people fought with that group of people, and those fought with these. Everywhere, people complained about taxes. They argued about religion, and they fought about land. Sometimes they fought about simply getting enough to eat. They fought and fought and they fought, and many people died. Isabella's husband was away fighting when their baby was born. "Come home," she wrote to him, "come home and see our son." But King John became sick and died when their baby was only 2 weeks old, and he never saw his son. The nobles elected the baby prince as their new king and cried, "All hail King John Sigismund of Hungary." But the young King John was much too young to rule a country torn by war. Other kings from other countries took most of Hungary away from John and kept it for themselves. Isabella and young John ended up living in a small eastern corner of the kingdom, a place beyond the trees, a grassy plain surrounded by high mountains and watered by quick rushing streams, a land called Transylvania. And there, in the only corner of the kingdom that was left to them, Isabella lived with her son and with her mother's friend, Dr. Biandrata. As John grew, Isabella and Dr. Biandrata taught him, as Isabella's parents had taught her, to be a good and wise ruler over all people in the land. But the wars didn't stop while John was growing up. People were still fighting, sometimes with other countries, sometimes with each other. They still complained about taxes, and they still argued about religion. Different people followed different religions in Transylvania, and none of them seemed to get along. The Catholics were arguing with the Lutherans. The Lutherans were arguing with the Greek Orthodox. The Greek Orthodox were arguing with the Calvinists, and the Calvinists were arguing with the Catholics. It just went on and on. In 1557, Queen Isabella issued a new law in the name of her son, the king. The law said that people could talk about and discuss religion, but they must not argue and certainly never fight about religion anymore. 2 years later, Isabella died. John was 19. Now he had to rule by himself. He wanted to be a good and wise king and to help all the people, just as his mother had tried to do, but the people were still arguing about religion. "What should we do?" young King John asked one of his advisors, a gray-bearded old noble with a cane. "How can we stop fighting?" "One king, one country," the advisor declared, stomping his cane on the ground. "For just as they do in France and Spain, one king, one country, one religion. We must choose one religion for Transylvania. Everyone will follow it, and then we will have no more fighting." King John didn't think that would work. But something obviously had to be done. Talking was better than arguing, and so, as his mother and Dr. Biandrata had suggested, King John invited preachers from different religions to come to his court and talk about religion, and they came. Dr. Biandrata invited his friend Francis David, and he came. The preachers talked and talked and talked and talked. Sometimes they gave up talking to argue with each other, and sometimes they argued so much that King John was afraid that they would give up arguing and start fighting, maybe even with swords. But the talks went on day after day, and no one was hurt. One man talked very well, and he convinced people in every discussion that he had had. That man was Francis David. Nowadays, we would call David's religion Unitarianism, because he said that God was one being instead of three. He said God was a unity, not a trinity. King John decided he liked Francis David, and he liked the religion too. He decided to become a Unitarian, and in the year 1569, he did. One king, one country, one religion, the old noble had said. But we need not think alike to love alike, Francis David said. And King John agreed. He wanted to be a good and wise ruler over all the people in the land. At a meeting in the town of Torda, he issued the Edict of Torda, a special law. The law said that no one shall be reviled for their religion by anyone. And he allowed the people of Transylvania to choose what religion they thought was best for them. On the 14th of January, 1571, King John Sigismund, the first and only Unitarian king in history, declared that Unitarianism was one of the official religions in the realm in Transylvania, and that people could choose how they wish to worship. Even today, in that place beyond the trees called Transylvania, which is now part of the country of Romania, there are Unitarian churches, the oldest Unitarian churches in the world. Unitarians have lived there for over 400 years, and Unitarians live there still. So today we have our baker space, and we've got a special treat for you all after the service. But in the meantime, let's have all of our children and youth join us at the back of the sanctuary as we head off to class.
For you shall go out in joy, for you shall go out in joy, and come back in peace, and come back in peace. Blessed be.
The mission of Birmingham Unitarian Church is to be a free and welcoming religious community that encourages lives of integrity, learning, service, and joy. One way we live out this mission is by giving half of our weekly offering to a nonprofit organization that shares our values and addresses needs in one of these areas: environmental action, economic justice, civic engagement, and racial justice. We support a new organization each month. Our recipient this month is Michigan Liberation's Black Mamas Bailout Project. Cash bail criminalizes poverty and keeps 8,000 Michiganders in jail every night simply because they can't afford bail. Very often, this is for nonviolent charges such as traffic offenses and theft. In the month of May, during which we honor mothers, the nonprofit organization Michigan Liberation requests our donations for their Black Mamas Bailout Initiative. The money is used to post bail for mothers who are caught in the discriminatory cash bail practice. When the person appears in court on their scheduled date, the bail money is returned and gets used again for another person's bailout. BUC has been working with Michigan Liberation for 2 years. This organization is dedicated to achieving peace, wellness, and justice for Black and brown communities in Michigan. Help us free mothers to return home to their children. Let there be an offering in support of our beloved community and organizations that build the world we dream about. This morning's offering will now be received with gratitude. Ushers, please come forward. Let there be an offering in support of our beloved community. We are a church of open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. With gratitude, we dedicate this offering to the good works of our congregation and dedicate ourselves to its service.
We are coming to our time of sharing spiritual practices, both individual and collective. I want to first note we try to avoid announcements, but today is just unusual enough that a clarification is useful. We are, as many of you will remember, having our annual congregational meeting today. And that will begin about half hour after the conclusion of service at noon here in the sanctuary and also online. For those who are gathered here in the building right now, we will have some time in between the end of service and the beginning of the meeting for fellowship in Hodis Hall, as was noted earlier. And the Pastoral Care Associates wanted to remind us that we're reinstituting something that has been a practice in the past. We'll have cards to sign during coffee hour for some of the people who are in need, some of whom we're about to announce, and a couple of others that we learned about too recently to have cards yet, but we will soon. And in particular, we'll note first a couple of joys. The one from Kimmery Campbell and Bill Fox. They share the joy that our middle son, Austin Campbell Fox, was married on May 11th to Hannah Muckler at the Congregation for Humanistic Judaism in Farmington Hills. So congratulations. Yes. They add that it's been a marathon of celebration for the family, including a wonderful 2-week visit from our former exchange student daughter, Antonia, traveling from Switzerland to be present. And there's a joy from Kelly Taylor, who's happy to share that her latest CT scan came back clear. She remains cancer-free. Now, we do also have sorrows, including this one from Yvonne Verschuren, asking for healing thoughts. Yvonne has been diagnosed with melanoma and breast cancer. She has surgery scheduled for June 5th. at University of Michigan. Also an update, sorrow, but also partial joy from Paula Olson. We announced one from her a couple of weeks ago, and she shares the sorrow that her husband remains hospitalized. But the joy is that he's receiving good medical care, and she stands in awe before the people with the intelligence to invent new treatments for all of us. And this particularly sad sorrow that we just learned about this morning. It was shared online both by Larry Larson, but I'll read the version that was shared by the family of Susan Arnold, that her time here with us came to a peaceful end just yesterday. She died quietly in her home, surrounded by family and a dear friend of 81 years. I had the opportunity to speak with Kathy, with Susan's daughter-in-law, just a few moments before service started, and she noted that Susan had been up and speaking on Thursday. Her decline was very quick, but she was kept comfortable in hospice. Her passing was indeed peaceful. And they add in the written note that she loved this BUC community, and our thoughts are with her many friends who will be saddened to hear of her passing. We do not yet have information on memorial, but we will share that information as soon as it is available. In all of these sorrows and all of the joys of our lives, those we express and those that we've not yet shared, may we continue to be present with one another in this beloved community of care and of support.
We come now to the time in our service set aside for spiritual practices. New this year, we are including an embodied practice. Research indicates that the pressure and stress of the past several years has had an impact on bodies and on our behavior. We have faced a lot of trauma and accelerated levels of change without enough opportunity to process or integrate what we've experienced. We've added this element to our worship services in an effort to use mind-body integration practices to help us feel centered and grounded. Today's practice is called Body Scan. It is one that I use at the start of each time I meditate. Notice what it feels like to be in your body. Start at your forehead. Notice what your forehead feels like at this moment. Is there tension there? Is it warm or cold? Do you feel any hair on your head? Slowly move your attention and awareness down to your eyes, then your ears, mouth, and jaw. What do these parts of your body feel like right now? Next, consider your shoulders. Is there any tingling, numbness, tension, or other sensations? What about your arms, your hands? How are things today with your chest and your back, stomach? Continue down the rest of your body, ending at your toes. Check in with yourself all along the way, and make sure to breathe deeply as you go.
Now for a time of deeper sharing, as we prepare to hear these prayerful words adapted from the writing of the Reverend Dr. Daniel Cantor. I invite you to find yourself reaching deep within. Find yourself reaching far beyond yourself and connecting with what you know as sacred. Spirit of life and love, God known by so many names, known in so many ways, and mystery beyond all knowing. We dedicate this church to the upreach of the human spirit, symbolized by good people in every age, to counsels of the people in meditations upon concerns of human welfare, to the education of children, to the guidance of the lost or despairing, to the care of all souls, and to the ennoblement of human life, to hospitality of all, without regard to sect, class, nation, race, gender, or the determinants of whom we love, and to communion one with another in mutual affection and respect, to the truth that we should know, to the good that we should do, and to the beauty that we should love, to the loving memory of all who have gone before us in the 76 years of BUC's history, with deep gratitude for those in the past who have made this adventure of the Spirit possible for us, and with high hopes for those who will walk in our spirit in the years that lie ahead as a heritage from the dead unto the living, as a gift from the living to those who shall follow us, and as a pledge of service and sign of faith, we dedicate this church, rejoicing as a free people who are joined together in mutual fellowship. May we hear covenant anew to walk in ways of truth and love according to our best endeavors. Blessed may we all be. Amen. Please join me for a moment of silence.
Our first reading comes from an updated translation of the influential essay of the 1940s, Existentialism is a Humanism, by the 20th century French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. He writes, "Our aim is precisely to establish the human kingdom as a pattern of values in distinction from the material world. But our subjectivity is not narrowly individual subjectivism, for it is not only one's own self that one discovers, but those of others too. We are attaining ourselves in the presence of the other, and we are just as certain of the other as we are of ourselves. Thus, those who discover themselves also discover all the others and discover them as the condition of one's own existence. It is recognizing that they cannot be anything in the sense in which one says one is spiritual or that one is wicked or jealous, unless others recognize them as such. The intimate discovery of myself is at the same time the revelation of the other as a freedom which confronts mine and which cannot think or will without doing so either for or against me. Thus, at once, we find ourselves in a world which is, let us say, that of intersubjectivity. It is in this world that you have to decide what you are and what others are.
The second reading was written just last year. It comes from Letting the Momentum Carry Us Forward, which was the final presidential column in the UU World magazine, written by then President of the Unitarian Universalist Association, the Reverend Dr. Susan Frederick Gray. Her term ended just last summer. She writes, "We have been living in the midst of challenging transitions for years. The pandemic upended so much. And yet the reality is that more change is ahead in all the ways our world is changing and in need of change. There is momentum carrying us all. Our values, our history and ancestors, our spiritual imagination of the beloved community, these give us momentum. Give us momentum and draw us forward always. And as a covenanted spiritual community, none of us are alone. We belong to each other and are source of strength and courage for the journey. I have witnessed this as our faith has grown through answering the call to dismantle white supremacy culture and deepen our practices of beloved community. It is shaping and changing us in powerful and beautiful ways. And for this, I am grateful. Because in this world where so much is unsettled, we need communities willing to remain unsettled, willing to lean in to the creative, challenging, sometimes messy, and powerful, growth-filled space of faithfully becoming prophetic, life-saving, and justice-making ministries. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Brian, for song leading. The young man faced an ethical dilemma, more profound than any he had ever faced before. Sadly, war throws many people into such dilemmas, and this college student in Paris was no exception. The Nazi invasion of France had already torn his family apart. His older brother had been killed in the initial German offensive. That was in 1940. And the young man, quote, burned to avenge him, unquote, by going to England and joining the Free French forces there. But his mother had no one else. Her only child, again, had died in battle, and she had separated from her husband, the boy's father, when he started leaning toward collaboration with the Nazis. She was living with her one surviving child, a young student, who worried about his mom's well-being if he did leave. That was his dilemma. Should he leave to fight the Nazis or stay to care for his mother? Recognizing his choice had ethical implications, he sought advice from his philosophy professor. As you might have guessed, it was Jean-Paul Sartre, who would go on to become probably the most famous existentialist philosopher of the 20th century. Sartre noted that the common ethical systems of the day were ill-suited to address this young man's conundrum. Christian moral teachings were not helpful because either act could be seen as self-sacrificing or loving one's neighbor as oneself, albeit different neighbors in each of the two choices. In the most prominent ethical philosophy of the time, that of German philosopher Immanuel Kant, was just as ambiguous. Sartre wrote, "The Kantian ethic says, never regard another as a means, but always as an end." In other words, don't treat other people as just means to an end, but each choice to stay with his mother or to go with the freedom fighters would mean treating the other one as means. Sartre concluded that I had but one reply to make. You are free, therefore choose. How helpful, right? But sarcasm aside, Sartre's answer was very true to his own philosophy. This is the man who wrote that human beings were, in his words, condemned to be free. As soon as we become aware that we have been thrown into this world that was not of our making, we become responsible for our every action and choice. It's an overwhelming feeling at times, but also a liberating one. We are free to affirm the values and the commitments by which we live our lives. But that freedom is not radically individualistic. It happens within the context and limits we receive from being in the presence of other free people. That's why Sartre dismisses a simplistically personalized view of subjectivity, and he instead affirms, as we heard in the reading, our intersubjectivity with one another. And so that freedom is not a decontextualized liberty, but it is freedom with others, by which we choose collectively how we will be in the world together. Okay, so you may be wondering right now, what's all this got to do with BUC? It's because of this. In this transitional moment in which you now find yourselves as a congregation, the obviousness of this church's freedom might be stronger than ever. So it behooves us to say a little more about where that freedom could take you, especially given that our congregational meeting, as noted earlier, will start just a little while after this worship service ends. And it's on these days, at these times, that I find it's fruitful to go deeper, to be more reflective in our consideration of where the congregation is now, and take a bird's eye view of it, as well as a look ahead to what's coming. Yet I also believe that all such considerations require proper context to be understood fully. So let me start by setting an important piece of historical context that informs some aspects of where we are today. This quote describes it well. It comes from a UUA-published adult religious education curriculum on UU history. It's written by Reverends Allison Cornish and Jackie Clement, entitled Faith Like a River. They write, between 1948 and 1967, Unitarianism experienced a period of enormous growth. 1/3 of the people who swelled our ranks during these years came through the doors of newly organized fellowships, groups of religiously liberal lay people gathered without a minister. The first fellowship so recognized was the Unitarian Fellowship of Boulder, Colorado, in 1948. Okay, so this movement of launching lay-led congregations called fellowships, as opposed at the time to minister-led congregations called churches. That movement started in 1948, but also some other congregations were being founded during that time as churches, served by a minister or intending soon to be served by a minister. Pause. Does anyone remember when BUC was founded? 1949. There you go. Within a year of the first fellowship's establishment, BUC was started as well. This is actually the second congregation I personally have served that was founded in the late 40s as a church, not as a fellowship. And I've also served, would you believe, 6 former fellowships, all founded in the late 40s through mid-50s. And I mention that because it's been my experience, both at BUC and at that other late 40s era church, happened to be in San Antonio, Texas. Both have a lot of cultural similarities with the former fellowships I've served. And I think it's worth looking a bit at what those cultural trends were. Reverends Cornish and Clement said it in a particular way. I invite you to listen to this and to consider to what extent this description matches your experience of BUC. They wrote, many congregations at that time began in heartland towns, reflecting a growing interest among well-educated Americans in individualism, humanism, and social activism. They attracted people who were interested in a strong degree of participation in their local religious community. The spirit of individualism that characterized them sometimes undermined efforts to create structures necessary for the group to function. Now again, these two ministers were writing about fellowships, but I'll be interested to hear later, especially from some of our longest term members, how much of this rings true for this church? Well, as with most everything else, this era of UU history had its pluses and its minuses. Frankly, so does pretty much every religious congregation that's ever gathered. And BUC is no exception. I suspect that both the positives and the negatives of this church, that this church in particular has faced over the decades, I should say, are exemplified in this building where some of us are now gathered. Minoru Yamasaki's design as architect highlighted the serenity and the serendipity that can be encountered in sacred spaces. It was architecturally novel, and it was a point of pride for this congregation. It also, as many of you know, featured multiple buildings with multiple roofs and furnaces, mostly exterior walls, and poorly insulated windows, all this in a location northwest of Canada that generally has winters to match. I appreciated the recent work and presentations of our facilities task force and honestly noting the significant maintenance this facility will need over the next few years and their related costs. Now, it's also true that at many points in its history, this congregation faced challenges not only with the building, but also with less physical structures like ministerial and lay leadership. Many of us know that there were pockets of dissatisfaction with Reverend Mandy Beal's ministry, a ministry which came to its conclusion last fall. Maybe those pockets made up a majority of the congregation, maybe not. But I recently looked back at this book, The History of BUC's First 50 Years. And I realized that something similar has actually happened here before. If you do have this book, I encourage you to take another look at chapter 2, and think about the parallels that last year may have had with the controversy around Lester Mondale's ministry in the late 50s and early 60s. Now, long story short, there were longtime members who disliked Reverend Mondale's sermons and other things about his ministry, while new members were loyal to him. Some established members withheld pledges, and some stopped attending. Does any of that sound familiar? Now, I'm simplifying a complex situation for brevity's sake, and certainly no one for or against Reverend Beale last year went so far as to get into a shouting match at a congregational meeting, which did happen in November 1961 over Reverend Mondale. When today's congregational meeting starts in about 40 minutes, let's be thankful those days are in our past, shall we? Reverend Mondale did resign after that meeting, and over 100 church members left with them. Many of them founded the Emerson UU Fellowship, now called Beacon UU Congregation in Troy. I want to make one observation about the parallel. When that happened, back in the early 60s, one of the results was that the people who wanted the minister gone were by and large the ones who continued as church members. To put it a bit simply, it had turned into a win-lose battle, and they won. I have seen other congregations where less dramatic events than those wound up creating decades-long patterns of behavior, patterns that lasted far longer than the lives of any of the individuals involved in the original events. Now, I honestly do not know if such a pattern is present here. I'm simply not with you for a long enough time to determine that. But I do believe that you asking yourselves that question, whether or not there's such a pattern, can be enlightening discernment for you to engage during your interim period that'll be starting in August. Now, I referred to win-lose battles. That says something about how conflict can work in churches, which I also think bears a bit of a closer look. There's one influential church consultant named Speed Lees, yes, that's his actual name, Speed, L-E-A-S, Lees, who spelled out different levels of church conflict. Taylor, can you put the slide up now? Thank you very much. This was prepared by an organization called the Center for Congregational Health out of North Carolina, but it was based on Lee's work. And I want to first note at the bottom, level 0, that's a church with no conflict, no disagreements, no differences of opinion. Does that sound idyllic? To me, it doesn't. Being in community with other people, being in what Sartre and other philosophers called intersubjectivity with one another, means that we will differ. It is simply part of the human condition. A church where that's not happening is completely non-vibrant. So, the levels are problems to solve, disagreement, contest, fight, flight, and intractable situations. Thank you. You can take the slide down now. Let me say just a little bit about each of them, though. Problems to solve, that first level, are usually healthy. This is where there are real disagreements. There can be conflicting goals, values, and needs, but any anger is short-lived and quickly controlled. Yes, the parties might begin to be a bit uncomfortable in the presence of others, but they rarely fall into personal criticism or suspicion of one another. Their focus is on solving the problem, moving toward some kind of unanimous agreement, and tend to utilize collaborative styles to do so. This is, by and large, where you want a church to be. with issues to face, but facing them directly, honestly, and covenantally. But some do escalate to be what he called disagreements, but he means it in a particular way. The kind of disagreements that mix issues with personalities, where problems become harder to define clearly and distrust creeps in to those with whom we find ourselves in differing opinions. Caution can take place in how we associate with each other. There might be less mixing with the other side, and the focus is more on saving face and coming out looking good. But it's not yet a win-lose conflict like I was talking about earlier. That starts with the third level, what he calls a contest. That's where the focus really shifts to the persons who are involved and the persons who represent the enemy, if you will. And this is where you start to hear personal attacks, formation of factions and sides. You may hear threat of members leaving. When it gets to this point, this is when you need to call in an outside consultant. And I've actually heard UUA regional staff members say, if you ever reach the third level of conflict over any issue, please call us in. But it can go further still. Some turn into fight or flight situations, where the shift moves from winning to getting rid of people. And some of the emotional responses can be characterized by cold self-righteousness. This is where there's a widespread refusal for people to speak to the other side, and some work to hurt other people or other groups. And sadly, in a few situations, it can go even further still. When it escalates to being an intractable situation, that's where there's no longer any clear understanding of the issue. The personalities have become the whole of the issue. The conflict has become unmanageable at that point. People become vindictive. There's an almost complete loss of objectivity, of emotional control. And people are not just seen as harmful to the offended group, but harmful to society. The goal can become actually destroying the other party, at least in a metaphorical sense. For example, in churches where this focuses on the pastor, it's not just enough to see that the pastor is fired. They want to make sure they don't get a job anywhere else either. Again, all this general information from that Center for Congregational Health I mentioned, but here's why this is relevant for BUC right now. You did recently have conflict over your minister. Now that conflict is now over, or is it? That's an honest question. It's not a leading question. I'm genuinely unsure. I see a little bit of circumstantial evidence that the conflict dynamics might still linger here, dormant but not resolved. I'm not sure, and I don't expect to uncover any revelations in my last 6 weeks with you. But again, I named this to invite you to quietly ask yourselves a couple of questions, and I want to reemphasize. I don't know that any of this is happening. These are not allegations. I offer them as diagnostic tools for you, so that you yourselves can determine how intense the conflict has been, and if any future conflict arises, how intense is that one becoming? But let's take the views around Reverend Beale. There are some here who are relieved that Reverend Beale no longer serves as minister of this congregation. So the people in that group, I invite you to ask yourselves, before she left, did you or any of those you agreed with ever make any personal critiques towards her or towards members of her family? Did you find yourselves forming alliances with others who disliked her, making any plans with them around her ministry? I know there were some who left BUC for a time I'll ask you to ask yourselves, did you do so quietly, or did you threaten to leave if something didn't change? But I'll also ask those who were more supportive of Reverend Beale, did not want to see her leave. Did any of you find yourselves forming alliances with other supporters of her about how to oppose those who criticized her? If any of that was happening, then I'll suggest y'all were at least at level 3 of conflict. Or maybe a few of you just wanted her gone. Or perhaps you supported her and you wanted her detractors gone. Did any of you experience from other church members or within yourself anything that felt like cold self-righteousness? If any of that did happen, that's an indication y'all are at level 4. And finally, did anyone ever consider contacting anyone at First UU of Ann Arbor, where Reverend Mandy Beale now serves, and, quote, warning them about her? If that happened, that's level 5. I don't know that it did. And if it didn't, great. But I'll ask one more question about whether or not these dynamics may linger. Here's a way you might be able to tell if that's the case or not. Do you find yourself still engaging with any of these thoughts or behaviors around those you perceive as having the opposite view of you around Reverend Mandy, even though she's now been gone for 7-8 months? If so, that could be an indication that there's still latent conflict around. Again, it is healthy to have problems to solve. Indeed, in the next couple of years, you have some significant problems that you'll have to solve around finances, around building issues, around staffing levels, and most deeply around your future direction as a congregation. And I do have genuine hope that you can do this discernment work in healthy ways, in ways that honor and affirm the full humanity and the moral agency of your fellow church members, including those whose opinions and perspectives differ from your own. I am not trying to tell you that you are lost in a conflict here, but I raise these questions as indications to determine a bigger question. Will you do that? Will you address these upcoming issues, these upcoming problems, in healthy and constructive ways? Or will enough people engage in these elevated levels of conflict that you'll do harm to church leaders, to fellow members, possibly even to BUC as a whole? I'll conclude by noting that I am convinced that the answer to that question is as true for you as it was for that young philosophy student in Paris over 80 years ago. You're free, BUC. Choose. So may it be for us all.
Please rise in body and spirit as you are able and sing our last hymn, hymn number 1008, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we
And so, as we go forth from this sacred time, from the many sacred places where we have gathered, may we go knowing that we are good, that we're enough, and may we carry with us the blessings of gratitude, of humility, and of resilience. Let us go forth to serve this world in the spirit of love. Amen.